Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2024 Mexico Open Initial Research Show. I hope you had as successful of a week at the Genesis that I did. After numerous close calls, seemingly for the past month or so, we finally get an outright across the finish line. Hideki comes through for us at 70-1. So a big hit for yours personally on that end. And we cashed 68% of the lineups that we played this week. That's right, 68% of the lineups got across the pay line over on the DFS side. So a very, very successful week this week for the Genesis. So I hope to hear from those of you in the community, whether you had Hideki outright or had a very successful week in DFS. Really, a lot went well for me. About the only suggestion that I had that really backfired was Wyndham Clark. But thanks to Spieth and the unfortunate circumstance there, my full fade of Spieth turned out to be a great success. Of course, very high on Hideki. Hovland played okay. Not the best, but I hope you followed me on the 6K plays that I recommended. Tom Hoagie, Luke List, even Adam Svensson, who I wasn't too terribly high on, but he was the highest rated of my 6Ks, ended up in the top 10 as well. Just overall, a fantastic week for the Genesis Invitational. And we're going to try to continue the momentum at the Mexico Open at Vedanta. So looking forward to that. We've got a lot to cover. So let's get into it, shall we? All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter golf gambler and a much better golf DFS player. Go check out fantasynational.com. You won't regret it, and it'll allow you to have the power at the fingertips to hopefully land more successful outrights like this past week with Hideki and the Genesis. So again, go check out fantasynational.com. In the description to the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where I post research every week for the PGA Tour. That'll be no different. That comes out Monday afternoons, generally around some course history and the pattern for winners at the said course. With the Mexico Open and Vedanta, going to be a little different tomorrow since this is only the third year that Vedanta has been seen. So not really a whole lot in terms of an established pattern. So we're going to adjust it a little bit tomorrow, but be on the lookout for that. If you want to see the weekly research that I do for the PGA Tour, then give me a follow at your preferred social media site. And then X is also where I place my betting cards and my top player usage every week for DFS. So if you want to see those pieces of information, then give me a follow over there as well. And then lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle is in the description. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. He is back this week. Took last week off, had some family plans, but I know he is back this week for the Mexico Open. Subscribe to that article that is over there on his social media site. It is free to subscribe to, and if you are a subscriber, you're going to be able to join us in his Substack chat every Wednesday as we continue the DFS talk after calls. So go show him some support, follow him over on social media, and subscribe to that article. Lastly, we're live. Chat is open. Again, I want to hear from all of this, or hear about the success you had at the Genesis. Hopefully you tailed me on the Hideki outright, playing a lot of these players that I was mentioning. Again, Tom Hoagie, Luke List, Hideki, all of that. And then moving forward for Mexico, what do you know of Vedanta? How much competition do you think Tony Finau is going to have this week? We'll get into that a little bit later this evening. Who are you targeting early on in the week? And what do you think some of the odds are going to be when the odds come out tomorrow? So let's do our initial research for the 2024 Mexico Open. And normally we start, and hopefully that camera is going to focus, although it'll probably be better viewing on your all's end. Might have to get out of the picture. Good evening, Bobby. Thanks for jumping in chat. I see you, winner, chicken dinner. That's right. we were a winner, and in fact, I did have chicken for dinner, so you got 2 for 2 on that one. But it's good to see you in chat. Hopefully things have been well. We're going to try to continue the momentum this week for the Mexico Open, a fairly new event on the PGA Tour. But you see, this is the GCSAA kind of fact sheet home, if you will. You see, there is nothing to do with Mexico yet. And we have not gotten a tournament fact sheet for Mexico the past 2 years, mainly because this is obviously in Mexico, so it's not continental U.S. So sometimes we don't get the GCSAA tournament fact sheet for tournaments held outside the continental U.S. or Hawaii, if you will. So with that, with no tournament fact sheet, we're going to jump straight to Fantasy National. But not to worry, I do have some of the information, or at least the most pertinent information, for Vedanta this week, in the sense that we're going to be looking at a couple of different metrics this week, or I should say filters. We're definitely going to be looking at long courses. Vedanta is one of the longest courses on the PGA Tour. I believe it is second or third longest behind Torrey Pines. It measures close to 7,550 yards. So it's well over this 7,400 yard filter for long courses. We're definitely going to be looking at long course filters this week. And just like a lot of the Caribbean style events, you're thinking of the Mayakoba or the Worldwide Technologies used to be at El Camaleon, now, or at least most recently, held at Tiger's Place at El Diamante, or El Cardinal at Diamante. You're thinking of Puerto Rico, thinking of Corrales. We're going to be looking at some Paspalum, and now there's not a lot of Paspalum putting data, but we'll gather what we can. But we'll be looking at some Paspalum total performance. So a couple of different things there in terms of Vedanta. You'll also notice that I do have a couple of players starred. There have been 2 withdrawals or 2 field changes already. Will Gordon and Will Zalatoris both have decided not to play Mexico after originally signing up to play. So Will Gordon and Will Zalatoris are not in the field this week. They have been replaced by Ryan Palmer and MJ Duffy. So just to give you that information there. Will Gordon, Will Zalatoris out. Ryan Palmer and MJ Duffy are in. But anyway, let's take a quick, broad look at the players in the field this week. The players who have played the best within the past 36 rounds. I don't have any other filters selected. Just the last 36 rounds or 12 months. Your top total performers in that time frame: Eric Van Rooyen, Nikolai Højgaard, Mark Hubbard, Taylor Pendrith, Doug Gim, Ryo Hitsatsune, Chesson Hadley, Davis Thompson, Michael Kim, and Kelly Craft. It is really surprising not to see Tony Finau in here, but he is all the way down here at 65th. Why in the world is that the case? It is what it is. Finau all the way down here at 65th in terms of total performance the last 36 rounds. Okay, so he had a pretty bad playoffs. I don't remember the playoffs. I don't remember that. I've slept since then, but that's also getting pulled in here. But we'll talk about Tony Finau, I'm sure, quite a bit as the night goes on, especially when we get to the tournament history or the strokes gained total tab. But there's a look at your top performers in terms of total performance. Again, you're going to have to trust me. This is just a very, very long course. Hopefully we'll get a GCSA tournament fact sheet, but we don't have one this evening. We haven't had one the last 2 years. So on long courses, those that are over 7,400 yards, and I'm going to back this out to the last 2 years to get enough data to make it significant. You see Finau's had 34 rounds. Most players have into the teens. You'd like to have more to make it significant or stable, but it is what it is. Your top performers in the past 2 years on long courses: Sam Stevens, Nate Lashley, Nikolai Højgaard, Michael Kim, Kevin Chappell, Nico Echeverria, Tony Finau, Harry Hall, Jimmy Walker, and Jake Knapp. Now, Jake Knapp only has 3 rounds from the Farmers, but he did play the Farmers fairly well. Of course, skipping Will Zalatoris. We're going to hold off on the Pass Palom just for a second because I'm going to do a couple of different things with that. Before we get too much further, let's go ahead and take a look at the course breakdown here in Fantasy National. First thing I like to do is try to get a feel for how difficult the course is. And to do that, I look at the 9th and 10th most difficult holes. If par falls between there, you're looking at roughly an average style difficulty course. You see the 9th and the 10th, both slightly over par. We get to the 11th, it's under. So we're looking at essentially an average difficulty course most of the time. I'm going to say that's a little bit, just the tiniest bit misleading. There are a couple of holes, or 4 holes in particular, that are pretty darn tough here, but there are plenty of scoring opportunities as well. So starting on the difficult end, you see the very difficult par 4 10th, placed a 4/10 of a shot over par. You have a 1/4 of a shot over par, 3/10, 3/10. There are big numbers to be had here at Vedanta. There is water on the course, and you're going to call it native area. It's basically jungle. That is not too far. If a player gets a little bit too wayward, there is a little bit of rough, but not a lot. So most of the time, you're going to see a player either in the fairway or taking a penalty. There's not a whole lot of rough, very little. But there is water on the course, and there's also a lot of native area or jungle. You see the very, very long par 4 plays to 520 on the scorecard, 2/10. So you got a few holes here that some big numbers can creep into play, but you got plenty of scoring opportunities as well. The par 5 6th plays to more than 1/3 of a shot under par. The drivable par 4 7th plays to 2/3 of a shot under par, 1/4 of a shot under par, 4/10 under par, a half a shot under par. So scoring opportunities abound and big numbers abound. A lot like Pebble Beach in that regard. Let's see, and Phoenix. Phoenix has some holes that can really come up and put up some big numbers on your scorecard, but also plenty of scoring opportunities. As you can see, there's a lot of length on this course. Just looking at the par 4s, 498, 520, 496, 475, 459. Lots of longer par 4s, even though you do have a drivable one. The par 5s are pretty long as well. 603, 637, 585. Now the par 5 18th is pretty darn short. So long holes here at Vedanta, and that's contributing to your over 7,500 yards in length. We move to strokes gained by shot type. Quite a bit in putting, but you see the around the green is not really a factor at all, unlike what we saw at Riviera. This is a ball striking course, and that's to be expected when you have a very long course like this. You just have to be able to drive it well, and that's why you see such a heavy emphasis off the tee. You have to have some good long irons as well to hit these greens. Now these greens are somewhat big. I've seen the number 7,000 square footage on average. So larger greens, but they're not necessarily the easiest to hit because they're going to be pretty far away on a lot of these longer approach shots. You'll see the 200 plus proximity going to be a big facet in the proximity chart here in a moment. But for your top 10s, it's a lot of ball striking, Top fives, a little bit less so, only because the putting really takes off from the approach and the off the tee. You see the around the green still lagging behind quite a bit. And for your winners, just look at the emphasis here in off the tee for the two winners. And the two winners here at Vedanta, John Rahm was your inaugural winner in 2022. And then last year, Tony Finau was your winner. Hey, good evening, Darnell. Thanks for jumping in chat. Hopefully you had a successful Genesis. Tailed me in some of the suggestions I gave you for DFS. Hopefully you had some Hideki, whether that was an outright or whatnot. But a very, very successful week this week for the Genesis. We're going to try to continue the momentum. So, except for the top fives, where the putting really takes off, we're looking at a big ball striking course. You see the top 10s there, a lot and off the tee. The winners, the off the tee, really, really takes off. So huge amounts of ball striking this week. I did, and glad you did well. Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, I know we had talked about. Fortunately, I didn't have that much of Justin Thomas. My big culprit was Wyndham Clark. We're gonna, at least for me, try to continue momentum, and on your end, look to build momentum this week at Mexico. So there's a look at your strokes gained by shot type. You see a lot of ball striking. We'll take a look at some pass, palm, and putting. There isn't a lot of data behind it, but we'll gather what we can. Now for top 10s, we look at strokes gained by hole by par. This is a par 72. Your full allotment of 4 par 5s, although 3 of them are on the back 9. And then your full allotment of 4 par 3s as well. So, or actually, no, you have 5 par 3s. My apologies. This is why I like having that GCSAA tournament fact sheet. So you do have 5 par 3s. 17th, 13th, 11th, 9th, and 5th. So you have 5 par 3s, 4 par 5s. Makes this a par 71. So very few par 4s on the course here at Vedanta. Very few of them. And we'll see how that reflects in the data here in a little while later in the show in Microsoft Excel. But par 71, 5 par 3s, 4 par 5s. So we look at average strokes gained by hole by par. A slight favor for the par 5s. You would expect that. This is where the professionals really make their hay, if you will. But the par 4s and 3s are fairly even for the top 10s. We look at the top 5s, the par 3s, and the par 5s, which you would expect since there's a diminished amount of par 4s here. And then for your winners, the par 5s really, really take off. You have to play these par 5s well. You're probably looking at some eagle chances. 2%, 3% on the drivable par 4, 3% on the long par 5. So you got a few eagle chances. I don't think there are enough eagles here to look at eagles by themselves, but certainly some birdies are better gained. We can take a look at, but we'll be focused on that tomorrow. But you see, for your winners, they're really, really taking advantage of these par 5s. But consistently, the par 3s are right there with the par 4s, or more important. So this is probably a week where the par 4s are going to be diminished a little bit in importance. We're going to be looking at par 5s and par 3s mainly. Moving to hole composition, this will help us out quite a bit, especially with no GCSAA tournament fact sheet. You got 2 shorter par 3s from 150 to 175. You have a mid-length 175 to 200, one from 200 to 225, and one from 225, or one long par 3, 225 plus. So there's your 5 par 3s. 2 shorter ones, at least on the scorecard, and then one in each of the other buckets. Your par 4s, you do have a drivable, 297, couple of shorter, 4 to 450, 4 from 450 to 5, 2 500 plus par 4s. And then your par 5s, you've got the short par 5 18th, 548, 585, and then 2 that are 600 plus. and they will play long. And that, you can see, is contributing to a 40% of the approach shots here at Vedanta come from 200 plus. Just the length of the par 4s, and of course all of these par 5s, except for perhaps the longest of the par 5s at 637. All of the other par 5s are attackable in 2. And that's also contributing to the 200 plus approach there. Not to be ignored, 175 to 200 is also a pretty significant increase here at Vedanta versus the tour average. It just doesn't look like that because of this astronomically skewed 200 plus. So we're looking at long approaches this week, and we'll see, especially tomorrow in the Data Dive show, if these contribute to high leaderboard success. Now, the previous 2 years, again, this is only the third year that Vedanta has hosted a PGA Tour event. The first 2 years, the cut line was at -1. So that would be average. It's on the easier side of average, but it's still average. So this is not a birdie fest. It has not played difficult, for sure. I'm not advocating for you to look at difficult courses. But this has not been easy, in the very least. So don't come in here thinking it's going to be a birdie fest. Scoring distribution, there are quite a few scoring opportunities around. We covered that in the scorecard, almost 22% here. But bogeys and the doubles, and there's a fairly sizable doubles bar here. Water on the course, natural hazards of jungle and native area. There are doubles to be had, and the Eagles bar is almost non-existent. So yes, it will tend on the easier side. That's why you see more scores under par than over par. But it's nothing astronomical that we're going to be looking at the easy to par filter. We just aren't. Driving accuracy, these fairways are extremely wide, but players aren't too terribly concerned about missing them as long as they're in the rough. And now I know I said there wasn't a whole lot of it, but again, these fairways are so extremely wide that generally professionals are going to be at least close enough to where they don't have to worry about the water or the native areas, unless you're really wayward, like a Sam Burns or a Bezadenhout or whatever. But you see driving accuracy just a little bit higher than the average tour event. That's only because players aren't afraid to be in the rough, whatever little there is here. Again, with these greens are large, but you see the green regulation percentage not too much terribly higher than the average tour event. That's just due to the fact that there are some very long approach shots here at Vedanta. Scrambling, a little bit more successful than the average tour event here, so scrambling is not all that difficult. And at 3 putts per round, slightly less than the average tour event, and that's mainly because of the size of the greens. And again, just speaking to the players not being afraid of being the slightest bit wayward, look at the driving distance. This is about the second or third highest driving distance on average on the PGA Tour. You see the average is 283, here 297. You also get a lot of rollout here too as well. Lastly, proximity. You would expect this with 1, long irons, and 2, big greens. Proximity to the hole, much further away than the average tour event. So there's a look at Vedanta in terms of a scorecard and graphical view. We'll come back to the players in the page, or players in the field this week, in the player page view. We saw just how important off the tee is. So in the last 12 months or 36 rounds, your top off the tee players in the field this week: MJ Duffy, Tyler Duncan, Keith Mitchell, Johnny Vegas, Doug Gim, Cameron Champ, Stefan Jaeger, Vincent Norman, Garrick Higo, and Alejandro Tosti. So off the tee, just a big factor this week. MJ Duffy, the number 1 off the tee player, who is in thanks to Will Zalatoris' withdrawal. You see the other alternate that is in thanks to Will Gordon's withdrawal. Ryan Palmer just outside the top 10, but Bramlett, Higo really moves it off the tee. Jaeger moves it. Of course, Cameron Champ's always going to be at or near the top of distance leaderboards, driving distance leaderboards. Johnny Vegas, Keith Mitchell. These guys can move it, and you see that is what is going to lead to a lot of success here when we go to the strokes gained total and then really dig into the data. So there's your look at the top off the tee players. Strokes gained approach, your top players in the field this week: Ches Reavie, Tony Finau, Mark Hubbard, Alex Smalley, Justin Lauer, Russell Knox, Ryan Moore, Callum Tarrant, Aaron Rai, and Doug Ghim. So Doug Ghim is your only player that is top 10 in both of the ball striking categories. 5th in off the tee, 10th in approach. So take that for what you will. Aaron Rai gets an honorable mention, 15th off the tee, and a lot of that is mainly due to accuracy. But 15th off the tee, 9th in approach. Alex Smalley, Callum Tarrant, top 25 in both, at least. So there's that. Now, we'll go to putting, and I'm going to click on the Paspalum filter. Just understand there are only 4 courses here that we're going to be putting into this data, and only 2 of them we actually have putting data for. Even though there are as many as 16 rounds, we're only going to have maximum of 8 rounds here. So let's go back the last 2 years just to try and get as many rounds as we can. But the courses that we're looking at, we have Cocoa Beach, which is the host of the Puerto Rico Open; Corrales, the host of the Corrales Punta Cana; El Cardinal at Diamante, which was Tiger's course this past FedEx Fall, the Worldwide Technologies; and of course Vedanta, the host of the Mexico Open the past couple of years. Only El Cardinal and Vedanta will give us actual putting statistics. Almost all of these others, you see Mexico. So in fact, only Mexico is giving us the putting data, and that's why I don't want to put a whole lot of stock into this. I will show you the top putters the past couple of years at Vedanta the past couple of years. Brandon Wu, Davis Riley, Cam Champ, Ben Taylor, Kelly Craft, Patrick Rogers, Molinari, Grillo, Badley, and Nate Lashley. But instead, because I have this Paspalum filter checked, let's just take a look at your top strokes gained total performers on Paspalum courses. So again, Pebble Beach, Puerto Rico, Corrales, this past FedEx Falls, Worldwide Technologies, and Mexico Open. Your top total performers on Paspalum courses, and again, all of these are Caribbean style events. Your top total performers: Tony Finau, your defending champion in Mexico. He's played Mexico very well both years. Brandon Wu has been very good here, as we'll see. Nate Lashley, Sam Stevens, winner at Puerto Rico, I believe. Or if he didn't win it, he played very, very well. Carson Young, Cameron Champ, Harry Hall, Michael Kim, Alex Smalley, Kevin Chappell, and Vincent Norman. Right underneath them, Nico Echeverria. No, actually, Echeverria is the one that won Puerto Rico. Sam Stevens just played very, very well. But last year's Puerto Rico winner, Nico Echeverria, very good. Last year's Corrales was Matt Wallace. Sam Stevens just played these courses pretty well. Third at the Corrales last year. So he's played Mexico okay as well. I'll have some more data around Paspalum performance tomorrow in the data dive. but we're just trying to get a gauge or a feel for some of these players this evening in the initial research. So there's a look at your top performers on Paspalum courses, and I think that's a very good kind of start to your research. Is it in these Caribbean style events? Because all of the Caribbean events have Paspalum greens. They're all long as well. Puerto Rico, Corrales, they're long, over 7,400 yards. I think El Cardinal was as well. I just don't remember off the top of my head. And of course, Vedanta is very long. But I also like using them as comparisons as well, because they're not easy. Even though they're alternate field events, they're not easy. They're not birdie fests. Corrales generally plays average. Puerto Rico can play hard, especially with the wind. So it'll be important to check the wind as well tomorrow, starting tomorrow, for Vedanta. All right. The only other metric we can look at, I'll bring this into the last 12 months. I'm kind of debating on par 3s or par 5s. Even though the par 5s for the winners really skyrocketed for the winners, let's take a look at par 3s, because I do think par 3s are going to carry some added significant weight this week. Good evening, Jeff. Thanks for jumping in chat. Scored 512 and a half week long this week with Hideki and Will Z. Thanks for the help. That's awesome. I'm glad to hear it. I got to say, this was a fantastic week for me. I don't know if you saw social media. I had the Hideki outright, and 68% of the lineups that I played crossed the pay line. So it was a very, very, very good week. Now, I didn't have everything right. I was, extremely high on Wyndham Clark. He missed the cut. I got lucky with the Spieth disqualification, considering he was playing well and he was a full fade for me. Sometimes it takes a little bit of luck, but it was a very, very good week, and we're gonna try to continue the momentum for Vedanta this week in the Mexico Open. So let's take a quick look. Again, the par 3s I think are going to carry some added weight this week. So our top par 3 performers in the field this week: Justin Suh, Grayson Sigg, Ches Reavie, Austin Eckroat, Padraig Harrington. Yes, Patty Harrington is here. Tom Whitney, Carson Young, Chesson Hadley, Mac Meisner, and Michael Kim are your top par 3 performers. And again, remember, there are 5 par 3s here at Vedanta. All right, with that, let's go ahead and jump to... actually, we can show the historic conditions here real quick. There's only 8 rounds. Again, it's not going to play to difficult. I don't think Vedanta is going to be difficult, but you see, it hasn't necessarily been a birdie fest. You've had a couple of rounds be easy, sure, but it's going to play to average. This is not a course where players go extremely low. Looking at Finau's win, 24, but the majority of players like 24, 21, 19, but top 10 was a minus 13. That's not all that terribly low. And then in 2022, Rahm was only a 17 for your win. So this is not a complete birdie fest. Of course, we're on Paspalum greens. The greens have always been firm, and just due to the nature of being a Caribbean event, a lot of times you'll get wind, as you can see from the prior 2 years. We've had nothing less than moderate wind and even a round of windy. So I imagine they're not going to be too terribly fast on the greens. But with hopefully they have a GCSA tournament fact sheet tomorrow. I doubt they will, because it's outside of the continental U.S. or Hawaii. But anyway, wanted to show that to you real quick and prove that it's not extremely easy. It'll just be on the easier side of average. But let's take a look at the tournament history of the Strokes Gained Total tab here in Fantasy National. Again, this is only the 3rd year Vedanta's been played, so not a whole lot of data, but enough to where we can gather perhaps what kind of players have played well here. You see your Strokes Gained Total leader, Tony Finau, runner-up or tied for runner-up the first or in the inaugural Mexico Open and then wins it. Brandon Wu's been very good, second and third. Cameron Champ, 2 top 10s. Patrick Rogers, 2 top 10s. Grillo's been good. Adam Long and Stefan Jaeger, 2 top 20s. Davis Riley didn't play it last year, but top 5 the inaugural. Ben Taylor. David Lipsky's been good. Sig and Lashley. Harry Hall. Toasty. Lots of distance here. Finau. Champ. Grillo. Jaeger. Bramlett moves it quite a bit off the tee. So a lot of distance here in these players that have played it generally the best. Some other players you might want to at least casually take a look at. Mark Hubbard generally plays well on these Caribbean style events and these past Palom courses. Austin Smotherman now was pretty bad in the inaugural when he made the cut, but he did top 5 last year. Andrew Novak has made the cut both years. Scott Piercy, generally pretty darn good in the wind. So that explains, his level of success. I know it's nothing near the, upper echelon, but still decent. So there's a look at the players who have played it both years and played it well. Players who haven't played it well, I'm trying to focus on players who have played it both years. Matt Wallace, surprising because Corrales is a comparison course, and he's the winner or the defending champion of the Corrales, but he has not played Vedanta well at all. Callum Tarrant, not well at all. Malnati has a top 15 and then a missed cut. James Hahn, pretty poor. Ortiz, I'm going to butcher that. I'm not even going to try it. Not the greatest. Aaron Baddeley, not the best. So there's a look at some of the players who have not played it well. But with that, that's a pretty good segue. We'll go to Microsoft Excel here. Let's take a look at Vedanta as we typically do on a Sunday and compare it against other full field courses on the PGA Tour. And again, right off the bat, you see just the emphasis in ball striking off the tee is 50%, almost 50% more important than the average full field course. There are only a couple of places where off the tee is more important. One of those is the Barbasol, an alternate field event that is an extreme birdie fest, and that's why ball striking is so big there. It's just, if you're in the fairway, you're attacking every flag at Keene Trace because that's not too far from where I am. I can't say it's local, but it's not too far from where I am, and I have friends who've played there, and pros will light that place up. So a little bit more important off the tee at the Barbasol. Okay, so I lied. It is the second most important behind the Barbasol. So big amounts in off the tee, especially but ball striking in general. You see around the green more than 20% less important than the average full field course. Just not a big thing. I don't know how much we're going to do with putting, only because Vedanta is the only course that we have putting on Paspalum. So I don't know how much we're going to do with Paspalum in terms of putting, but we're definitely going to be looking at Paspalum a lot this week in terms of total performance and whatnot. So take this for what you will. It's not a whole lot to compare to. Moving into distance and greens and whatnot. I mean, a lot of it is in the distance. You see that looks like a silly, stupid, almost fluky number. It's just a huge facet. You saw Cameron Champ and Tony Finau and John Rahm, who's played well here. Brandon Wu's got some distance. Distance is a fairly big deal here at Vedanta. Because even with the amount of distance, you still have some long irons in. If you're the longest of long players, you might be able to turn that into mid irons, and that's why distance is such a big factor here. Fairways, doesn't really matter. These fairways are so wide that almost everybody is hitting them. say almost everybody. You can't say that everyone's going to hit the fairways. And if I were playing, I know where I'd be in the water. But fairways just not a big deal. Greens will be, I think. And this might be one of those exceptions for me where I look at greens on long courses as opposed to greens when it's difficult, because Vedanta is not difficult. It's just average. So I'm leaning right now at looking at greens on long courses. Scoring, just to emphasize, that it's not a birdie fest. Yeah, birdies are slightly more important, but look at the bogey avoidance. That's the way the Genesis was last week. Bogey avoidance was more important than the birdies gained. So at least in terms of from the data compared to other courses, it looks like we want to look at bogey avoidance again this week. Moving into the par threes, no surprise, 42% more important. Again, there are 5 par threes here, so that makes a whole lot of sense onto why this par 3 number is so big. I don't know if we're going to be looking at a specific range. Probably more so the par 3s total, but these two ranges look like they're carrying a lot of the weight. Par 4s, again, not a surprise. There's one less of them. This is a par 71, so they're getting a little bit mitigated in the importance. It looks like the 500 pluses are carrying a lot of the weight, which again makes a lot of sense. There are 2 of them here at Vedanta, whereas most courses have either 0 or 1. So I'm not sure if we want to look at just this link. We might be looking at this one as well. We'll have to see. Par 5s, yeah, makes a lot of sense. You still have your full allotment of 4 par 5s. You have 2 that measure from 600 to 650, and sometimes it stretches into the 650 plus. So I imagine we might be looking at the longest of long par 5s. But when we dig into the data tomorrow, the data specific to Vedanta, we'll get a real good, clear picture of if we want to separate out any of these ranges or just look at par 5s, par 4s, par 3s in total. But you can see par 5s carrying quite a bit of weight, and the par 3s are carrying an exceptional amount of weight. Lastly, in terms of proximity, this is where, again, I struggle a little bit with proximity as a statistician. You see the 200 plus, I said you were going to see, it's just off your screen, of course. 200 plus here is actually negative compared to the average full field course, but 40% of the approach shots come from this range. So does it lead to leaderboard success, or is it something we need to look at or not? This is why I'm not all that confident with proximity. Instead, it's at least the data is showing us that the 175 to 200 is more important for upper echelon success. There's a look at Vedanta in terms of comparing it against other courses. And then we're going to end the show off like we always do on a Sunday evening with the early look file. Players that, how many times they've played Vedanta. Again, this only being the 3rd year, you're going to have 1 or 2 here. Their average finish, miscut, and then the stats for Vedanta. You see Tony Finau's just been immaculate here, even positive with the putting. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take out the players who have only played it 1 of the 2 years. The players who have played it both years, and there's not too many of them. I mean, Callum Tarrant down here is the bottom. So there's not many of them. What have they been doing well for the players who have played both years well? You see a lot in the off the tee, especially in your upper echelon. I mean, a heavy amount of green here for the players who average a top 10. Tails off a little bit, but what you don't see, I mean, all of these players, all the way down to Joseph Bramlett down here, all of these players are positive by a very big margin in approach. The lowest number I see is a 1.3 from Patrick Rogers. He's just been very good off the tee here, but he's been good on approach as well. But Finau's putting video game numbers up with his irons here. Jaeger's been very good with the irons. Grillo been very good. Lipsky, Novak. I I mean, even Martin Trainer down here is a negative 0.1, which is really darn close to field average. And then there's more solid performances in the irons behind him. So approach is not something we're going to want to overlook. Yes, off the tee is carrying an astronomical amount of weight compared to the average week on the PGA Tour. So we're going to be looking at a lot of off the tee and a lot of distance. But we can't ignore the other half of the ball striking. We're going to be looking at approach. Around the green, not a whole lot. You got mixed amount of success around here. You got some pretty deep negatives from Grillo. You got some pretty big positives from Finau and Sig and Jaeger. Don't see around the green playing too much of a factor. The putting will be interesting. We saw Brandon Wu. I think he was second. Was he second in or at Fantasy National in terms of putting on Paspalum? I know the vision's skewed. I'm trying to replicate what I've got going on here. It would help if I'm on the right page view. We want strokes gained. On Paspalum. Okay, Brandon Wu was tied with Davis Riley. I know it doesn't show the ranking for you, but you can at least see in what order. So Davis Riley and Brandon Wu, they are each number one in strokes gained putting on Paspalum the last 2 years. You got Champ, Taylor, Rogers, Kraft, Molinari, Grillo, Badley, Lashley. So if we take a look, so Brandon Wu, there's Champ, there's Rogers, Grillo's at a 3.6, Lashley's at a 3.2. Yeah, okay. There's Badley at a 3.1. I think he was at the bottom of that top 10 there. He hasn't done it much else right here, but he has putt well here. And of course, if I brought in everybody, like Davis Riley would come up here, but I'm trying to see what the players who have played it both years, what they're doing. So putting, again, to reiterate, I don't know how much we're going to be able to do with putting on Paspalum, since Vedanta is the only course we get putting data on Paspalum. This might be something where we're looking more at like strokes gained total on Paspalum and trying to extrapolate from there. It's not great, but it's all we can do. Moving into distance and greens. Again, distance pretty solid here, although seeing a decent amount of red. Ches Reavie is never going to be long, so you can understand that. Lashley, okay. Grillo's about field average. Jaeger's fairly long, and he's been negative in terms of distance here, but has had tremendous amounts of success. Okay. Good drives gained is probably something we might want to look at. Oh, yeah. Look at the greens in regulation. Just big numbers in here. Video game numbers from Tony and from Cameron Champ. Jaeger's put up big numbers. So greens. Probably greens on long courses, as I was mentioning. Going to be a decent little bit. Scoring. You got favoring the birdies, favor birdies. Fairly even. If we go down to, average of top 35. Let's see what we got here. 2.7, 3.0. Oh, and I just noticed that not a single player is negative in bogey avoidance. So this looks like it could be another week where we're looking at bogey avoidance. Again, probably bogey avoidance on long courses. Par threes. Again, not a single player negative until you get down to Lanto Griffin, which is outside the top 40 on average. Just some big numbers in here. This is a 2.7, 2.6. So one of the very, 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 very few times that par fours aren't going to lead in this total category. But 2.7 in the par threes, 2.6 in the par fours, the par fives, the 1.7. Interesting. So the par threes are actually the highest. Doesn't look like a particular range. Just looks like all Okay, backing up what we saw in the other spreadsheet or the other file, comparing it against other courses. Look at all the green in the long par fours. Par fives. Looks like just kind of total par fives. There aren't huge numbers in here. Again, most pros take advantage of par fives. We'll end the show off looking at a little bit of proximity. I would have thought total procs would have been something. But you see, there are a lot of fairly middling to negative numbers in total procs, considering how big these greens are. So really, we might actually be looking at just 175 to 200. Look at that. It looks extremely strong. For the players who have played both years and played it well. 200 plus, a little bit less so. I'll bring back everybody that's in the field this week. And again, sorted on average finish. Thanks, Gabe. Appreciate it. Thanks for jumping in chat right at the end of the show. Much appreciated. Hopefully you had some success as well, because I know you were really high on Luke List, who was threatening to win from the beginning of the day-to-day. I know you didn't have an outright on him, but I know you were high on him in DFS. Hopefully you tailed a little bit on the Zalatoris. But yeah, appreciate that, Gabe. And I meant to put it on social media, ran out of characters or whatever, but not on top of the Hideki outright hit. 68% of the lineups that I played this week crossed the pay line. So it was a fantastic week. It was a fantastic week for me. I hope you had just as much success as I did, and hopefully we're going to continue this momentum on to Vedanta. And of course, that hasn't been seen much, but is showing some patterns. It is showing some patterns a little bit. So again, reminder, if you are interested in seeing that pattern, I post that Monday afternoons. I'll try to do that tomorrow. There won't be a whole lot behind it because it is only 2 years. Top 10 in the micro birdie. There you go. Congratulations. That's very well done. That's a big contest. So well done there. But again, if you're interested in seeing the research that I do every week on the PGA Tour, I'll have that out tomorrow. There's a little bit of a pattern, but mostly I'll be looking at Vedanta as a course and perhaps some players that fit that bill. What seems to apply at Vedanta. And then a reminder again for this Wednesday, just like all of February, my Wednesdays are kind of booked up. So the DFS Tactics show will be at 10 p.m. on Wednesday evening, not at 9. But thanks to Bobby and Darnell, Jeff and Gabe for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. I'm glad to hear about the success this week. Darnell mentioned he did okay. It's just too much Justin Thomas, which seems to be a common theme around DFS this past week. Jeff had some success, and then Gabe with the tremendous top 10 on in the micro birdie. So love to hear about the success. Continue to let me know. Would love to be able to shout out other members of the community who have success, or if you have success in other aspects. I know Darnell plays a lot of fantasy NBA, fantasy NHL. So if you have success, let me know. Would love to be able to shout out members of the community. Thanks again for tuning in, watching, listening, supporting the channel by liking the videos, commenting, subscribing. I love what I do, taking an in-depth look at sports statistics, giving you a statistician and a data analyst's view of what he sees, trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. Sometimes he gets lucky and he gets Hideki right. Let's keep it going. It's all right. Let's keep this momentum going for Vedanta this week. For all of the wagers that you made this past week at the Genesis, for all the DFS contests you played this past week at the Genesis, and until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.